right, for this assignment, what you're going to be doing is taking your material exploration artwork, and you're going to be taking these pieces and collaging them onto this piece of paper, which is going to demonstrate the definitions of our principles of design. So what I want you to do is carefully pull out this material exploration page from your sketchbook once you have all 9 spots finished, and then turn to the definitions of your principles of design in your sketchbook. It'll be easier if you can see these side by side. So the directions on this worksheet say you're going to use the material exploration to create a collage in the space below demonstrating all 7 principles of design. Look at your principles of design notes for suggestions of how to create the definition as a second layer. So on your notes, I give you the definition, and then under the definition, I give you an example of how you can create that particular principle in your art making. Your material exploration had 9 spaces that you created, and there's only 7 principles of design. So 2 of these you're not going to end up using on this next assignment. You'll have 2 extras. If you make a mistake, you could try it again on your extra spaces. Then it says draw a second layer on top of the material sample and then cut out that shape and glue it down on this worksheet. Underneath each large box, write the name of the principle that you've demonstrated. And then as an early finisher, if you have time, you can even design and color the area around the collaged spaces. So this is a little bit tricky in that you have to plan this out ahead of time. So it doesn't matter to me if you go in order from balance down to contrast, or if you just want to pick one word and then demonstrate it in one space here, and then you might check it off your list because you know that you have used that particular principle. So one of your principles is pattern. It's when you decorate the surface with planned repeated units of design. Example, consistently repeat the same design with alternating colors as an option. So I could bring out a pattern even more in one of my designs. It could be that the pattern is filling the entire surface of one of these designs, or it's filling in a small area. So one thing that you have to know about your second layer: you cannot use Sharpie marker on top of the oil pastel. The Sharpie will not stick to the oil pastel. Instead, with the oil pastel, what you can do is a technique called Graffito, where you take an object that's a little bit sharp on the end. A pencil is a great object, and you scratch a design into the surface of the oil pastel. So you might end up seeing a little bit of color from the color pencil. So I like to use a color that's going to match if it is seen. So maybe I'm going to start with my oil pastel space, and I'm going to create my own pattern. It's a unit of design that repeats. So maybe I start out with stripes. So I'm just going to scratch away a line, and I'm not sure if you can see that very well in the video. We'll see if we can get closer. So I'm going to start by scratching away stripes, and what's left is the bottom layer of the oil pastel. Okay, so now that is the beginning of a pattern, but it could become even more complex. So now maybe I scratch in the surface zigzags. So what's happening is the oil pastel is getting pulled off the surface by the colored pencil. And you might not see it very well in the lighter colors, like the white section. It didn't stand out as well, but it did work in the darker areas. So this would be my example of pattern. So once that is finished, I'm going to get my scissors, and I'm going to cut this out, and it is okay if this page separates from your sketchbook paper. It depends on how much glue you put on underneath. These might separate easily, like mine just did, or you could just cut straight through both pages. But what I'm going to do now is carefully cut out around this edge because the grading rubric printed talks about craftsmanship. So once I've got that cut out, this grading rubric says the student successfully demonstrated the material, and I'm talking about this step when we did our material exploration. The student successfully demonstrated the principle of design as a second layer, including labeling the principle underneath. So the next one says student showed careful craftsmanship with the designs. Painting, coloring, cutting, gluing are neat. So I've got this one finished, and what I'm going to do is glue it down into one of my empty spaces. So I'm just going to use my glue stick, and I'm going to get glue on that area, and then I'm going to attach this, and I want to press down to make sure it's actually going to attach. Okay, now I can use my art supplies to label what this principle was. So this one was pattern. And now when I grade this assignment, I'm looking, does this label demonstrate the design on the top surface of what you added because it represented the definition? So if I'm finished with pattern, I might put a check mark next to pattern. I don't want you to cross out the word so much that you can't read the word anymore, but now you know that you have worked with pattern. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to my material exploration, and I'm going to look at some other definitions to see what I can demonstrate. Okay, contrast says, refers to using opposites to catch the viewer's eye because of the strong differences in the elements. Example, light colors and dark colors, or straight lines versus curved lines. So maybe I go to my stamp that I made, and I could color in the white areas to show contrast. So I've got blue here. If I look at the color wheel at the back of the room, whatever color is directly opposite blue is contrasting, or we say it's complementary. So I could do this with colored pencil, or I could do this with Sharpie marker. So blue and orange are contrasting. So maybe I come back in here, and in my in-between space, I'm working with my opposite colors, my contrasting colors. You could also layer on top of your ink with more color from a colored pencil. So for example, if I want my blue to get a little bolder, maybe I take my blue color pencil and I start to layer over the top of the ink. I don't want you to do a second stamp because you're not going to be able to get it lined up very easily. So keep to dry materials today for your layering. So you can see how now my color pencil is starting to achieve value, which is one of our elements of art, because I see light blue and dark blue in some areas. So this is just kind of enhancing the beginning design that was there just from the stamp itself. Okay, so this one was called contrast. So I'm going to cut this one out. And then I'm going to glue it down in another empty space that I had on this worksheet. And then I'm going to label this with the principle. So this one needs to be titled with contrast. Okay, so I'm going to work my way around the rest of my principles of design. I'm going to check that one off because I've already used it, until I have all 7 thought out and glued down and titled. As best as you can, I want you to stick to dry material on the top surface, which would be the Sharpies, the colored pencils, the ink pens would be your best option. I want you to think about how you can layer on top of what's already here to really bring out that principle of design.